And here's another video to talk about the principles and the theories of language acquisition and learning. So the first chapter, entitled The Theories of First Language Acquisition, has this topic, the behavioristic approaches. Okay, so let's talk about the principle of the behaviorist theory. Let's read. So the behaviorist theory believes that infants learn oral language from other human role models through a process involving imitation, rewards, and practice. Human role models in an infant's environment provide the stimuli and rewards. So we have here the key terms: imitation, rewards, and practice. Okay, so let's have the background of this behavioristic approach. Okay, behaviorist theory, which is basically a psychological theory in its essence, founded by J.B. Watson, is actually a theory of native language learning, advanced in part as a reaction to traditional grammar. The supporters of this theory are Leonard Bloomfield, Owen Maurer, B.F. Skinner, okay, and A.W. Stats. Behaviorism was advanced in America as a new approach to psychology in the early decades of the 20th century by making a particular emphasis on the importance of verbal behavior, and received a considerable thrust from the educational world of 1950s. Okay, so the behavioristic approach is not just famous for language acquisition, but for all the other kinds of learning. Okay, so I have these experts, okay, who will tell us something more about this behavioristic approach. So we have Ivan Pavlov, okay, so he developed the classical conditioning theory, in which you have studied, or you're going to study deeper in a certain professional education subject. Okay, so in this theory, a certain stimulus leads to a particular response. Okay, that's from Ivan Pavlov, which is associated with behavioristic approach. And then we have Edward Thorndike, 1874 to 1949. He emphasized the role of experience in the strengthening and weakening of stimulus-response connection. So again, stimulus-response, but there is an additional information. It's the strengthening and weakening of stimulus-response. Okay? So what are the operating principles, okay, of this behavioristic approach, so that you will know if ever that there's a situation in which the learner encounters this one, you will say that, this is what the behavioristic approach is saying. Okay, so we have the first one. Behaviorist theory dwells on spoken language. Okay, it's because of the behavior, okay, that is affected. That's why it dwells mainly on spoken language. The primary medium of language is oral, yes. Speech is language because there are many languages without written forms. Because we learn to speak before we learn to read and write, which is true, okay? Alright, that's why spoken language must have a priority in language teaching, right? Okay, so we have another operating principle. Behaviorist theory is the habit formation theory of language teaching and learning, reminding us the learning of structural grammar. Language learning concerns us by not problem solving, but the information and performance of habits. Like for an instance, I am the teacher and you're my student, and I'm going to teach you when to use this phrase, may I. Okay, use this when you want to have something from someone. May I have some of that, some of those, and you will just follow. The same pattern goes for all the other teachings. So it's like that. It's not problem solving. Okay? Unlike from our other lessons, we tell that learning is done because of problem solving. It's not applicable here in the behavioristic approach. Okay, so we have another operating principle. The stimulus response chain, you could see there the S and then response, is a pure case of conditioning. Okay, behaviorist learning theory emphasizes conditioning and building from the simplest conditioned responses to more and more complex behaviors. Okay, so it is just saying that the more that there are stimuli, the more that there will be responses. This comes to mean that clauses and sentences are learned linearly as longer and longer stimulus response chains are produced. Okay? So, the more that you're going to learn more words, the more that you're going to utter more phrases and then more sentences. Okay? There. Another operating principle, the learning due to its socially conditioned nature can be the same for each individual. That's what the behavioristic approach is saying, okay? Each person can learn equally if the conditions in which the learning takes place are the same for each person, okay? So it means that if two people are in the same environment like that, okay, and they have this the same habit formation, then the learning, the pacing of the learning is just the same. This is what they are saying according to the behaviorist. But later on, I'm going to tell you something about that. Okay, this one. So we're talking about the counter arguments now. Okay, so this will be contradicting to the operating principles. Not necessarily that they are going to contradict their own words, but there are principles which really contradict to the nature of learning. Okay, so we have the first one, counter argument. Basic strategies of language learning within the scope of behaviorist theory are imitation, reinforcement, and rewarding. Yes, however, researches made on the acquisition of learning have demonstrated that children's imitation of structures show evidence of almost no innovation. Okay? Moreover, children vary considerably in the amount that they imitate. Okay? So, because they just imitate, there's no innovation. Okay? So, that's the counter argument to that one. Alright? And children do not really learn, okay, at the same pace, okay, because they have this inherent capability. All right, so the acquisition of vocabulary items will differ from one another because some kids will tend to forget, some will not. Okay, so it really depends. Okay. And then we have another counter argument. In behaviorist theory, the process of learning relies more on generalization, rewarding, conditioning, three of which support the development of analogical learning in children. Yes, that is true too. But it can be argued that the process of learning or teaching that encourages the learner to construct phrases, clauses, and sentences modeled on previously settled set of rules and drills is thought to obstruct the instinctive production of language. What do we mean by instinctive? Okay, so when we say instinctive, it's the unconscious. Okay, unconscious part of our system. Okay, and when we pertain to language acquisition and learning, okay, this mainly points out to the language acquisition, because when we say language acquisition, it focuses on the subconscious part. Okay, so we're not really aware that we are already learning such word. Okay, another one, obstructions made on instinctively based learning will doubtlessly harm the creative way of learning. Okay, so words learned unconsciously will give a doubt to the learners. Okay, as how he was able to learn such words when he was used to learn through drills and practice. Like for example, for a child to say that he was hurt, he said ouch, and he was not taught how to express that. He just said it unconsciously. So he will be confused. How come I was able to learn that one? Isn't it that I must just imitate? Okay, so like that. Alright, another counter argument. The rate of social influence on learning is not satisfactorily explained. To what extent and rate, okay, does the social surrounding promote language learning? This question it remains unexplained from this behavioristic approach. Another one, it is highly unlikely for learning to be the same for each individual, just like what I'm saying a while ago. That is, each person cannot learn equally well in the same conditions in which learning takes place. For the background and the experience of the learners make everybody learn differently. So, we have mentioned here the background and then the experience of the learners. Because of course, our background differs from one another. We have different names, we have different family names. Therefore, we come from different families. So, we are influenced by different things. Okay, another one. The main strategies of the behaviorist theory can only be true for the early stages of learning. Yes, which takes place when the kids are infancy and in early childhood periods. Because of the so-called conditioning, right? If you could remember that, okay? You will just tend to imitate, of course, if you don't know the words to utter and yet you need to talk because you need something, okay? That's for young child. But how about those who are already grown up? Will they imitate words if they want to learn the language? No, they're going to what? They're going to have another strategy. And behavioristic approach is out of the picture. Okay? So, moreover, let's read. This theory is fruitful for the most part of an animal experimentation and learning. Okay, so clearly, language learning and its development for the behaviorist is a matter of conditioning by means of imitation. Don't forget that. Practice because of drills, reinforcement, and habituation, which constitute the pieces of language